The African American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, and religion. We will explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they had been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Reverend Herbert Daughtry, pastor of the House of the Lord Church, longtime advocate for everything good in the black community.
Thank you, and longtime friend and a great admirer of yours.
Thank you, Herbie.
Right.
Recently you have returned from Chad,
yes,
looking at the situation in Darfur.
Yes.
Tell us about the trip, the circumstances, what you found, what the response of the Sudanese government was, what the response of the black Sudanese was.
Right. We became interested in the situation as it relates to the Darfurian people. About 3 years ago, Councilman Charles Barron and I did a civil disobedience and met with the ambassador. He told us that things were improving.
The ambassador from Sudan.
From Sudan. Manus was his name, and that things were improving, and so we kind of left off. But then,
what was his criterion for improvement?
Well, he said that they were going to allow humanitarian access. They were in negotiation with the UN and with the AU, African Union, as it relates to the hybrid mixed peacekeeping force, and that they were in communication with the Darfurian leadership. So we stepped away, but then things escalated, and about 8 months ago, we pulled together what we call the National Religious Leaders of African Ancestry concerned about Darfur. We wanted to awaken and enlighten our people as to the situation. As you know, the UN called it the worst humanitarian crisis in the world today. Some people estimate over 400,000 people have been killed since 2003. 2.5 million people have been displaced.
For those in the audience who are not really truly up to date on this, what really is the nature of the humanitarian crisis now?
Well, 2.5 million people displaced.
Over to other parts of Africa, Chad.
Particularly Chad has been a heavy burden. The Central Republic of Africa is bearing a heavy burden. And moving around in the Sudan, because what gives rise to it is, according to the reports that I had read, and then I talk with people in the refugee camps, I talk to people in the bush, I talk with people from one end of Chad to the other, is that the Sudanese government are very much involved, bombed these villages, and then sent in the heavy equipment. Then came the Janjaweeds, as they are called. These are Arabs on horsebacks, and Janjaweed meaning evil on horseback. They come in, they loot, they rape, and then they occupy these villages. I was told by women, particularly one woman I can see her just as vividly, that her husband was killed before her very eyes, and that the babies, some of the babies were smashed in the ground. I was told by one of the young female soldiers, and I asked her, why are you out here in camouflaged uniform and with a weapon on your back? She said, well, the Janjaweed raped my sisters, raped my mother, and destroyed the village where I used to live. This was the testimony consistent throughout, whether you talk to Darfurian leaders, which I had the privilege of talking to the leaders of the Sudan Liberation Army with JAN, that is Justice and Equality Movement. I talked with them in the bush, in fact.
To put this in perspective, the Sudanese government, which is primarily controlled by people of Islamic descent.
Arabs.
Arab descent.
And Muslims, yes.
And they are displacing black Sudanese who are not Muslim.
No, almost. They are displacing Darfurians who are Sudanese too, and Muslims. So it's not, and I'm glad you raised the point, because it's not a religious situation. The Sudanese government, as ruled by El Bashir, came to power, I think, in 1989, and instituted Islamization.
Instituted what?
Islamization.
Oh, okay.
Bringing in the
spreading
Sharia
Islam.
laws. That's right. And in fact, began to attack the south of Sudan. Sudan is divided into 5 areas as benefited the British. So in the south, where you had a significant Christian population, they invaded the south, and for 21 years they had this battle. Finally, under the leadership of a man named John Granger, after 21 years, succeeded in winning a concession from the Sudanese government, in which the president, the South would have its own president, and after 2011, they would have a plebiscite. So now they turn to Darfur, which is the western part of Sudan, which is indigenous African and which is Muslim, and began to attack them and to drive them to the villages. Now, according to the people to whom I spoke, the root cause is Arab expansionism. I don't want to be overly generalized on this. I want to say that Arab elitist leadership attempt at expansion. But I think that's a more
Which
accurate.
has an economic root, no doubt.
Yeah, there's an oil and other minerals involved, and land. So as the indigenous African population has moved out, then the Arabs are brought in and to people the area. So it is significant to note, as the leadership told me, and in the bush, I should say I went at a very important time. I didn't choose the time, providential, I think, in that Silver Care, who is the president of the South, had called an emergency meeting of all of the parties involved. The representatives from Eritrea, Libya, Morocco, Egypt, Chad, Central Republic, Ethiopia, because Sudan, the largest country in Africa, is bordered by 9 different countries. In addition to these governmental representatives, also the Darfurian leadership. So I had a chance to talk with Silver Care. I had a chance to meet with some of the other leaders. And then when I went south or east in Abidjan, the armies had come in for these high-level meetings. They were allowed to come in and bring part of their armies with them. And I was privileged to meet with them in their various safe quarters. Yeah. And got some great footage. I encouraged them to go on tape, on record, as to their position. Their position, as I've stated, is that it is a Arab expansionism, elitist Arab expansionism, and an attempt at Arabism. The imposition of Arab culture, the imposition of the Arabic as a language. So they therefore resisted. 2003, they started seriously battling against the Sudanese government. Now, we visited Gaga. Gaga is about 17,000 populated. It's about 30-40 miles from Abidjan, which is the border on Sudan. We talked to women, as I pointed out to you. One of the vivid memories we have is the women who were fighting over water. Each family gets 4 gallons of water a day, and so they wait all day long. And when the water run out, they don't have sufficient water. Then they started, the tension emerges. And the difficulty is the geologist says that unless the water is rationed, it's going to run out, which means you create the most serious problem. So here you have a camp, and this is a smaller camp, 17,000 people, insufficient medical attention, insufficient water supply, insufficient food. There is the obvious deformity in body deformities, disease, and the people are steady coming in. And then you ask, you say, now, what did these people do to deserve this? Okay, the Sudanese government say that the number is grossly exaggerated. They didn't kill all that many people, maybe 9,000. You know, it sounds like the argument Giuliani used to make about New York City Police Department. New York City Police Department is the finest in the world. After all, Detroit kills more black people than we do. You know, Detroit kills 100 black people. We only kill 50. So it's kind of like El-Bashir is saying, we only killed 9,000. But even if you take his number, why
do it at all?
Well, I do it at all. What did these people do to be driven from their land? And so from their side, the argument is, the position is, listen, if you can believe over 800-mile period geography over which I travel and talk to governmental officials, civic leaders, people in the refugee camp, people in the bush, all over, the stories were always consistent. The government came with planes. In fact, recently, front page New York article several weeks ago had these pictures of the Sudanese government planes being painted with the UN sign and the World Food Project signs, cutting in weaponry. So they were disguising the planes. And so the people said, well, the planes came in and bombed, and then the government supported these Janjaweeds. And they killed, they raped, they destroyed the villages. Now, either people got together and made this lie up over all this mileage, and said to reinforce this lie, we'll leave our homes where we have been for hundreds of years and live in these squalid, deprived refugee camps. Now, if you want to believe that, if anybody can believe that, they can. If you reject that, then you have to say, or if you accept that people's story, then something has to be done.
Something has to be done, and I know you and many advocates have been talking about this. One of the reasons some people feel that this isn't being dealt with is because they're black Africans.
Right.
They're folks like us.
Yes.
Your group is a religious group.
Yes.
There are several other groups that are interested in Darfur.
Right.